Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the show, Yankee Mags. It's episode 3. First of all, before we jump in, I want to make a big shout out and a big thank you to our number one and first subscriber to the channel. Very fun to think that there's someone out there that enjoys what I'm talking about and wants to be involved in this. So, whoever you are, thank you, much appreciated, and hopefully many more to come. International break has been interesting. I think we'd all kind of wish that it maybe happened at another time, not right now in the middle of the season once we're all excited, but it is what it is. Let's see some recaps from notable performances if you want to check these out. I think Voltamata had an okay game against Northern Ireland. It looks like he put an assist through. That German team seems very weird though. So I'm very excited for him to get under Eddie Howe's tutelage. I'm sure he's excited. And I'm going to come back to this later, but the Bundesliga is a very weird league. And I think that there is going to be some long-term problems for player competitiveness, the competitiveness of that league in general going forward. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But then, in a general sense, like talking about the competitiveness of, let's say, European to include English football leagues. I'm going to put a controversial spin on this. I know if you're an English listener, you're probably not super pumped to hear what I have to say, but go into this with like an open mind for a second and like think about some of these proposals that maybe can make the league more competitive. I think what is a problem that we're trying to solve when we talk about competitiveness in these leagues? I think what it really comes down to, and this is no surprise, is money. It's revenue. How do you stay self-sufficient? How do you draw, enough water to be able to play, be competitive, attract talent, pay talent, make sure that it's not coming all out of the fans' pockets. I mean, it's money in sports is crazy, and all the more so right now in the Premier League. So I think there's an interesting thing here at play where in the Premier League, and I'm starting here at the top, is just when it comes to viewership, how media revenue is shared. In the Premier League, to my understanding, it's not actually shared equally among all of the teams in the Premier League. That money is skewed based on sort of viewership, success to those top 5-ish, 6 teams. They're really getting not undue, but they're getting more of the revenue than your bottom teams, your rest of teams, which as you think about just where it is coming from on a viewership scale, that's going to start to skew everything as it trickles down. And so when you compare this actually to the NFL splits media revenue equally among all of the teams. So all 32 teams in the NFL, regardless of how they finish or how they perform or how many viewers their team gets individually, that money is evenly split. So that's a really great equalizer when it comes to just sort of what is drawn in from the sport on a broad level and how that filters out to the on-field products that make up that aggregate. And so I think there's something interesting there that Premier League could think about it. And on that note, I have noticed there is a seemingly maybe outdated, but kind of a roadblock law that prohibits games from being aired in England, some very strict blackout policies. I think there just needs to be maybe a refreshed thinking on how Premier League media is consumed and how that revenue is shared among all the teams. I think that would go a long way, just starting at the top with media. When we move down a notch to the teams, paying wages of these players is really sort of a big part of the equation. And even as Newcastle found out, it's really hard to hold on to your top guys. You're losing an Isak level player to double the wages that Liverpool can pay. And that's tough. And then if you look back down the line, Johan Wisser's getting a bump up. So Brentford's struggling. And so it's sort of pushes everything down to where there are just wildly different wage realities for every team. And so when you look at the NFL, there's actually another very sort of socialist policy in play where the NFL has a salary cap. So every team has to abide by the same salary cap. There's a salary floor, but essentially you can pay your players on the NFL team whatever you want. If you want to play your best guy everything up to the cap, that's going to affect how much you can pay the rest of your team. So there has to be some, it keeps salaries in check. I know there are some crazy contracts that NFL players get, but on the whole, the rule makes sure that there's competitiveness from a wage standpoint in the NFL. And that, if you know the NFL at all, you know that every team every year has about an equal chance of, making the playoffs and succeeding. It's not like the Premier League where, it's going to be a real long shot for, Brentford or Wolves to make it, into even the Conference League. That's tough. So what the salary cap gives you is just more realistic control over wages so that everybody is playing from the same sheet of music, but then that makes all teams attractive. So if you're a player in the Premier League that's looking to move, you're ideally going to who's got the best on-field product, the best coaching support, right? You're thinking about it in more than just money. And I'm not trying to say that money is not important. Obviously it is, but I think it can be done equitably, and other leagues like the NFL demonstrate that with a salary cap. To that point, as an add-on, the NFL has what's called a luxury tax. So if you're an NFL team, if you somehow go over that cap, you're really trying to lock down a top player for whatever reason, that can happen. There is room to budge that cap. However, whatever you go and spend above the cap falls into what's considered the luxury tax territory. So that applies a premium tax to that spend, and that tax is then shared equally amongst the rest of the teams in the league. So you're not locking up teams to spend necessarily. You're disincentivizing them to go above the level. But if they do, that is not a lose-lose for the rest of the league. They actually benefit a little bit from that. So it's just another, again, an interesting way to do it. And as compared to the Premier League, where, yes, there are PSR and what's going to be, I think, squad cost ratio rules to come, those very much benefit the teams who already have the commercial revenue to match, if that makes sense. So an Isak is actually, he doesn't really have an incentive to look at another team because it's only 3 or 4 teams that are actually able to pay him what he wants. Whereas in the NFL, any team can pay anybody whatever. It just makes player movement much more democratic or equal, if you will. So I think those are a couple of really interesting points, and I'd be curious what people think about them. I think those are maybe the 3 most achievable reforms that the Premier League could put into play. I think all of the competitiveness issues do stem, though, from what is the blessing and the curse of the Premier League, which is the relegation structure. Relegation, in my opinion, as a new, relatively new fan, is such a cool and exciting dynamic that makes every game really important. Even if you're not, competing for the top levels, there's some jeopardy to making sure that you're not relegated. That makes it fun. That makes it exciting, and it brings everything down to the wire, which is a really nice change of pace from the NFL and albeit all American sports, where there's a pro league and there are sort of amateur or college level athletics, but there's no cross between the two. Players will cross the membrane, but teams will not. So I think that's really cool. It's really refreshing. However, no surprise, that adds a level of jeopardy to these ownership groups that is probably really horrifying. Like the prospect of Man U going down last season, I mean, that would probably be a hell greater than anything they could imagine, where you're such a royal sort of blue blood team in the country at the very top of the top, and you're sinking down into the championship, which I know a lot of teams throughout their history have come and gone and moved, but like this seems like we're in a different paradigm where the money involved, the sort of the fan element to it all, like it makes it do or die for the top teams. Like that is an unacceptable fate to now be relegated. So all of these sort of competitiveness problems, I think, not to be too conspiratorial, I think they stem from that relegation fear factor. And so all of the rules that are coming in place are sort of implicitly, subtly built to maintain the order as it is. And as was quoted once, I need to find this article, but I thought this was just a shocking quote from someone at the Premier League was, "We can't have another Leicester City." Like, how is that not the most damning quote when it comes to sort of running a fair and balanced league? I don't understand it. So, yeah, I think those are a few points to consider. I think and I'm going to go into a quick 2-minute drill on this, but I think this is a really fun one to think about. I don't think it's a likely scenario for reform at all, but because the Premier League and the English football system has so many teams at so many levels of the pyramid, it is really cool to see how players rise and fall in their journeys. They're always climbing. There's academies for every team, which is really cool. Where in the NFL, the MLB has farm teams. I'm not going to get into that right now. But the NFL doesn't really have that system of dedicated academy for your team. They do a draft. They draft players every season, which allows the worst team in the league to draft first. So they get sort of front of the line, first dibs on the next crop of talent coming up from the college league, the NCAA. And, ostensibly that sort of buoys their chances to be competitive for the year because they get to recruit this sort of instant fresh blood. I think the Premier League, like the academy system's not going away, obviously, but it would be interesting if there was a mechanism every season for teams to sort of shake things up a little bit from a prospect and academy perspective, so that not everybody is beholden to the transfer market and these sort of very challenging financial wage structures that really, like, there's only one way the players go, and it's up. It's not across. So picture this. What if at the beginning of every summer, every team takes stock of their academy, and maybe they have 3 untouchable tags that they can slap on a academy prospect. And they put those on their prospects. Those 3 from every team are sort of off the table, but everybody else in that academy is up for auction. So if you're Wolverhampton, you can take a look at everybody's academy across the Premier League and say, okay, I'm going to make a bid for one of the guys in Chelsea's academy. I think he's great. He doesn't seem to be being utilized a ton. He's a young player. I want to put him into action now to help my team. I think that'd be a really interesting way to sort of revitalize some of the bottom teams, give them opportunities to move players at a maybe a more approachable rate with an auction structure. Obviously, there's still revenue that goes to the team that is selling, but then you give these young guys a faster opportunity to get involved, to grow, if another team's willing to take a shot on them. So it's just something I was thinking about the other day that could be an interesting wrinkle to the system to add some vitality, some dynamism to the transfer market and make it not so predicated on who can pay the most for the top guys. You know what I mean? The top established guys. At least give the guys at the next level down some opportunities to get involved and grow quicker. So anyway, those are my thoughts for today. Lots of other stuff going on. Excited to get the games back on Saturday. I'm going to come out with my next video. I'm going to do a Premier League end of season table prediction. So we'll see how much or how little I know about all of this when it comes to pass this time next year. But anyway, thanks for listening. Excited for our first subscriber. Hopefully more to come. Get involved down below and have a great night. Over now. See ya.